joining us today in the first Participate Coalition webinar. So I am Joyce Ilas. I am the Information Specialist of Participate, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Parang kailan lang eleksyon na naman. So, but just how prepared are we for the May 2022 elections, especially now that we are still in the middle of the pandemic? I'm sure a lot of us still have so many questions about this coming elections. How safe is this election going to be? How reliable and how credible will the conduct of the 2020 elections be? And what else can we really do to make sure that the 2022 elections will be safe, fair, and free? So these are just some of the issues that we would like to address in the first coalition webinar of Participate today. So let's start with Attorney Ona Caritos of LENTE. She is the Executive Director of LENTE and an advocate for elections. She spearheads LENTE's policy and legal reform efforts, which include the passage of Election Service Reform Act, creation of accessible voting centers, creation of the Vulnerable Sectors Office in COMELEC, and other policies that ease the process of registration and information access for elections. Again, let us welcome Attorney Ona Caritos.
Magandang hapon, Comgas. Magandang hapon sa lahat ng kasama natin sa Participate Coalition. I hope to make the next 10 minutes as exciting as possible because I'll be talking about election preparations. So I'm tasked to talk about preparations for the elections or COVID-proofing the elections, our 2022 national and local elections. Siyempre, alam naman nating lahat that we are in the middle of the pandemic and our elections next year, and nakita naman natin to during this voter registration. This pandemic has really affected our electoral processes, and most probably it will affect our elections next year. So we want to know about the preparations for the elections, or how to COVID-proof it, or how to make it safe for all electoral stakeholders, for candidates, political parties, for voters, for, of course, COMELEC, yung mga frontliners natin in the elections. We also want to make it safe for all electoral stakeholders. So, yeah. So, again, I'm Atty Ona. You can call me Ona. Hindi ko alam kung sa mga hindi nakakilala sa akin, bata pa po ako, hindi po ako parte ng tuyot at dugyot. Nasa youth, pa rin ako, sa youth section. So, what can we do? And we've been doing this at ito ginagawa na po ng NAMFRE, ginagawa ng PPSRB na Participate ASO. It's to assess the risk on every stage of the electoral cycle, to have constant and consistent consultations with health experts and enhance collaborations, discussions with our government partners, most especially COMELEC. Itong constant consultation, nakita namin how important it is, especially with the ever-changing situation that we have. The protocols implemented at the start of this year, yung mga footbath pa tayo, or masyado pa tayo naglalagay ng alcohol sa mga surface areas. Now, it's not being recommended by our health professionals. When we had consultation discussions with majority of the health organizations in the Philippines, we were asking them, because part of COMELEC's preparation, and we saw this in the Palawan Plebiscite, yung paggamit ng footbath, tapos may alcohol na supply, alcohol na supply sa lahat ng mga electoral board members natin. Hindi nila masyado na nire-recommend actually yung footbath kasi hindi naman daw nakakatulong yun. So there's a need for constant consultation with health experts because of the ever-changing situation that we have right now. And I'll be sharing on our Palawan Plebiscite experience on the health protocols and implementations that we saw March of this year. So 6 months ago na ba yun? 5 months ago. We submitted a code of conduct, a proposed code of conduct to COMELEC, to Congress, and I know you have a copy of this as well. on how to ensure the safety of our elections and how to ensure the safety of all the stages of our electoral cycle, starting with voter registration, and now the filing of COC 2 weeks from now, then campaign, then election day conduct. So if you don't have a copy yet of this code of conduct, please ask from the secretariat because they have a copy. And ito yung mga priority recommendations namin to COMELEC's general instructions. The first is accessibility of the forms. We saw in Palawan, health declaration forms were used by COMELEC at the start or at the entrance of the voting center. And it was in English. And of course, hindi naman lahat ng tao nakakaintindi ng English. So one of our proposals is to make it accessible and translate it into the major languages. And for us to have a reserve pool of electoral board members, nakita namin sa Palawan how hard it was for the Commission on Elections, the Palawan office of COMELEC, how hard it was for them to recruit electoral board members. Kaya we're proposing na dapat may reserve pool agad in case na magkaroon ng may sakit na electoral board member or yung mga poll workers natin, meron huhugutan agad si COMELEC. And we also saw in Palawan, despite the forced migration of political parties and candidates to the online platforms, the ease of using Facebook to spread information, to conduct our public education activities. At yan, nakita namin how COMELEC prioritize conducting their public education activities using Facebook. Nakita pa rin namin sa Palawan how a majority of people, a majority of Filipino voters are not yet connected to the internet. One, because of the lack of internet connection, or how hard it was, or how slow their connection was, or the lack of gadgets. At nakita namin to sa mga far-flung barangays. So we're calling on COMELEC to use local media for information dissemination. I know COMELEC has a number of ongoing partnerships with the major online platforms. Meron nga silang TikTok, meron silang, for sure, may Facebook sila, may Twitter sila na ma-engagement. But at the end of the day, a number of Filipinos still are not connected to the internet. Voters Assistance Desk, under the current regulations now, the volunteers of PPCRB, NAVFEL, they will be manning the Voters Assistance Desk. And what we saw in Palawan, hindi lahat ng schools have Voters Assistance Desk because of the lack of volunteers. So what we're proposing is to hire an additional personnel to man this Voters Assistance Desk, para ensure tayo na may mga tao talaga na magbibigay ng precinct at sequence number dun sa mga voters. Okay. We're also proposing a combined form for the health declaration and the Voters Assistance Desk form para mas mabilis yung proseso, because all our voters will be mandated to answer health declaration forms, and they need the Voters Assistance Desk form for them to vote more efficiently and faster. So we're proposing dapat combine niya yung form na yan para mas mabilis, mas efficient yung process. Dapat mas marami health workers in the entrance of the voting centers. What we saw in Palawan was there was one medical personnel assigned per voting center, but that one medical personnel was not enough to man effectively the triage happening at the entrance of the voting center. So we're proposing one additional personnel, sana health personnel, to assist the health personnel assigned in every voting center. Itong procurement of markers, unfortunately, I think hindi na to matutuloy. Kasi in the Palawan Plebiscite, gloves yung ginamit for the voters to ensure na walang transmission or walang exposure. But I think nakabili din ng gloves na supply yung COMELEC for the elections next year. So this proposal, I think, will no longer be accommodated by COMELEC. Expanded number and role of the support staff. We saw in COMELEC the innovation of the IPP, or the isolation polling place. Ano ba yung IPP na yan? The isolation polling place is the polling place for those voters who register a temperature of 37.5 and up, or answer yes to any of the questions in the health declaration form. So basically, ito yung polling place ng mga may sakit, mukhang or parang may sakit, to prevent exposure to the voters who are not sick. But what we saw in Palawan was there was only one support staff assigned to the isolation polling place, and there was a delay in the retrieval of the ballots from the original polling place of the voter who will vote in the IPP or the isolation polling place. So we're proposing an additional staff to make the voting faster in this IPPs or the isolation polling place. Aside from the accessibility audit of voting centers that we always do for the elections for our persons with disability and older persons, we're also proposing a safety audit. So access and safety audit of all the voting centers. And sana ito, larger venues for the voting centers. Okay. Ito yung pinag-uusapan ngayon. Ito yung medyo nakaka-disappoint. Dahil tayo lang naman to. Ito yung nakaka-disappoint sa COMELEC. Parang last summer, they had a 3-day conference to draft or to make this COMELEC new normal manual. And since summer, we've been waiting for the finalization of this manual or for COMELEC to conduct consultation exercises, for COMELEC to conduct consultation exercises with all stakeholders. But fast forward to the start of this month, COMELEC just submitted its new normal to the House of Suffrage, to the Committee on Suffrage sa House. So kakasubmit lang nila nitong COMELEC new normal manual after waiting for a few months. And na-confirm namin in one of the hearings conducted at the House na itong manual na to, it's no longer a draft and it's already signed by the Commission and Bank. So we were waiting for consultations at the very least for COMELEC to improve the manual, but in one hearing, Commissioner Ko said that this manual is already final, it's already approved by the NBAC, and they're just waiting for political parties and other stakeholders like us to make comments to the manual and suggest recommendations. So parang ano pang purpose ng consultation if the manual is already finished? They will conduct simulation but on Sundays sa Pasay, sa Pasong Tamo Elementary School, and voters is Barangay 113 and 110. So meron namang vote dissemination din. Yun, Pisa Mora, sabi ni Sir Eddie. So yun yung hinain ko sa COMELEC new normal manual. Hindi pa ba ako overtime? 2 minutes lang. Ayan, pictures na lang para mas yes, this Sunday already, Fred. Pictures from our monitoring of the Palawan Plebiscite. And for everyone's information, medyo kami dito, medyo parang YOLO or you only live once, because our whole team in the LENTE Manila National Office went to Palawan to actually observe and monitor the plebiscite. Because we decided na kailangan natin makita to firsthand to see the innovations or the health protocols COMELEC will implement in the elections next year. At ito nga yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na malalaman kung mataas yung temperature mo or kung may lagnat ka because there will be a temperature gun check at the entrance of the voting center. But our consultations with health professionals, they told us na hindi naman ganyan ka-accurate yung temperature gun na yan. Na naisip namin, oo nga naman, kasi 1,000 lang yan sa Lazada. How accurate will that temperature get, the temperature of voters? And pansinin nyo, meron na ba kayo napuntahan na establishment na nag-register kayo ng temperature na 36.5 and up? Parang standard na or parang yun na yung usual na bato ng temperature ng mga guns na yan, 36.5. So, ito yung sample ng Voters Assistance Desk manual. Alam mo, Dad, mag-coordinate lang tayo sa election officer ng Pasay. At 32, patay ka na niya, Joyce, no? Kung 32 yung temperature mo. Di ba? Ang weird. Pero yun lang yun ang protocols. 35.3, ang lamig-lamig mo na yan. So ito yung Voters Assistance Desk. Ito yung para mas mapabilis yung proseso para alam na nila yung precinct at sequence number. At the entrance or at the door of each polling place or the classroom where we will vote is may footbath. Kita niyo naman yung silver or yung black na parang foot rug sa baba. And there are alcohol stations. So voters are given alcohol before they enter the polling place. or the classroom. And inside the classrooms are plastic barriers para daw ma-prevent yung transmission. But that was the science a few months ago. When we had our most recent consultation with health professionals, with the health group, sabi nila hindi na ganyan effective yung barrier na yan. Kasi nga, meron na namang face mask. All voters are required to wear their face mask in the voting centers and inside the polling places. O, sabi ni Dini, tama nga, air ventilation is very important. So ito mga plastic barriers ito, it's just a confidence building measure on the part of COMELEC. And we've been telling COMELEC na, sabi ng mga health professionals, pwede nyo nang tanggalin yan and just invest on other, for example, yung sa air ventilation nga, or use a bigger venue. But I think COMELEC will still push through with these plastic barriers. Para lang confident ang mga tao. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na precinct and sequence number ng mga voters na ibibigay nila sa electoral board bago sila boboto for easier identification and validation of identity. Okay. Ito yung kinikwento ko sa inyo na IPP or the isolation polling place. Literal na naka-isolate sila kasi doon sila sa malayong lugar na malayo doon sa mga regular polling places. And all the electoral board members assigned to the IPP or the isolation polling place, they are required to wear PPEs because of the exposure. Sabi ni Army, patapos na daw ako. Mag-share na lang ako ng pictures, Army. Of course, kahit pandemic, makakaboto pa rin dapat ang PDL, ang mga persons deprived of liberty, ang ating mga senior citizen or older persons. So we will still have priority lanes for pregnant women, heavily pregnant women, persons with disability, and older persons. Ito yung mga plastic barriers in place, tas nakapila ang mga tao. And in any given instance, only 5 voters are allowed to vote inside the polling place. So 5 voters, and there was a limited number of watchers or poll watchers inside the polling place. Tatlo lang sila, dominant majority, dominant minority, and citizens are. So, konti talaga yung tao inside the polling place. Pwede, COVID positive or suspects IPP. But, ito nga yung sinasabi namin sa COMELEC, itong innovation nila na IPP, even though it's exclusive and accessible to those who are sick, the health professionals do not want it to be implemented because it's really risky and dangerous for the regular voters or those voters who are not sick if they will be exposed to voters who are sick or who are COVID positive or are showing symptoms of COVID. So ayaw naman natin exposure, pero parang hell-bent si COMELEC to implement this IPP. But if we take a look at other jurisdictions who already had their elections in the past, may ibang innovations may ibang measures that our election management body could implement to still ensure that these voters will not be disenfranchised, but they're pushing on with the IPP or the isolation polling place. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Salamat at magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Alamin kung ano ang mga kasalukuyang ginagawa ng Participate. Bumisita lamang sa inclusivedemocracy.ph at i-follow ang aming social media accounts.